When you look at news reports about the jobs market, are there trends that you see in what journalists may be missing?
I think for a lot of everyday Americans, they see these headlines about the unemployment rate being pretty low, healthy job gains, a healthy job market. And I think that doesn't really jibe with how a lot of Americans feel about the job market right now. What's going on here is that even for folks who are still in a job that haven't been laid off, a lot of American workers feel like they're stuck in their careers. They feel like they're not making progress up the career ladder. And so while they might be happy that they're still employed, that doesn't mean they're happy with the current situation that they're in the workplace.
Great point, because in retail numbers, also, we have, over the past 2 years, seen a dislocation between what consumer confidence and sentiment numbers say and what the spending actually suggests. This seems like a parallel here. Why is there a disconnect here?
When we're talking about consumer spending, retail sales, we have to remember that a lot of those figures are driven by higher income Americans, right? Because they tend to make up a lion's share of that spending. And so if you are one of the people who is in a higher paying job right now, is still getting promotions and raises, then the current economy might not necessarily feel that bad. But for lower income households who are still feeling the accumulated effects of inflation over the last 5 years, that the economic situation probably feels a little bit worse. This is another case where it's important to remember, certainly as economists and commentators, there's a difference between how we talk about the data and how Americans actually experience it. We can say inflation is almost back to the 2%, but a lot of people still see that prices are higher than they were 5 years ago, and they're still feeling that in their wallets.
I mean, that's what matters, right? Is the actual time frame for the consumer that they're looking at and living by. They don't care about the nuances of month over month, year over year, like these underlying numbers. So should we be talking about this, completely reframing the way that we talk about the labor market?
It's a great question. I think it's important to look at both of these things for different audiences. For the Federal Reserve, as they're thinking about setting monetary policy, like they need to think about what the inflation rate is, they need to think about what the unemployment rate is, and to some extent, like how consumers actually feel about the job market or how they feel about inflation is maybe not as important as like the true economic data that's coming in. But at the same time, that's not something that we can ignore, right? Because people are going to feel how they're going to feel. And obviously that has big impacts in the political sphere, and that can have downstream impacts on how people make decisions around spending, around their careers, about where they live, where they can buy a house. So eventually sentiment does ladder up into hard economic data, but sometimes, like what we're seeing right now, there is some dislocation.